How's it going, guys? Today I have the pleasure of bringing you some of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, and I'll be doing it in collaboration with my friend, the Big Kiwi. We've been friends since we both had less than 1,000 subscribers, and I really think he deserves more exposure. I'm a fan of his channel, he works hard, and he finds incredibly rare NBA stories that most fans don't know about. This is part 1 of our What If collaboration, and part 2 is available now on his channel. Link is in the description and in the pinned comment. So let's get started. What if the Rockets made the trade? The 1984 NBA draft class is famously known as one of the greatest draft classes of all time. Most of us hardcore basketball fans know the draft order off the top of our heads. Hakeem Olajuwon to the Rockets, then Sam Bowie to the Blazers, and then Michael Jordan to the Chicago Bulls. What many people don't realize was that there was nearly a blockbuster trade that night that would have drastically changed the course of basketball history. You see, the Houston Rockets had the first overall pick, and at the time, Hakeem Olajuwon appeared to be the clear choice to be taken first. The thing is, the Rockets already had a star playing at center, which was the future Hall of Famer, Ralph Sampson, who had just come off his rookie season where he averaged 21 points and 11 rebounds. Other teams around the league also knew that the Rockets were in a bit of a dilemma, so the Portland Trail Blazers made an offer of their second overall pick and their young star in Clyde Drexler in return for Ralph Sampson. Drexler had shown promise at this young stage of his career, but he was still pretty unproven, so the trade Portland offered looked pretty appealing at the time, but in hindsight, we can now see how horrible it would have been for their team. If the Rockets had accepted the offer, they would have had Clyde Drexler and the first and second overall pick, which they almost certainly would have used to take Hakeem Olajuwon and Michael Jordan, forming what would have been on paper the strongest big three in NBA history. Obviously, there's the questions of fit and on-court chemistry, but at a certain point, a team has so much talent that even if they underperform by their standards, they're still likely dominating the league. Olajuwon and Jordan were both elite players the second they set foot on the court, and they were both elite until about 1998. With the greatest player of all time, one of the greatest centers of all time, and arguably a top 5 shooting guard of all time, what is the realistic projection for the success of this team? At least 10 championships? It sounds bold, but at the same time, completely reasonable. This would have dramatically changed the Lakers and Celtics rivalry of the 80s, because now, the Rockets are likely keeping the Lakers from making the NBA Finals in the mid to late 80s. I could go on and on about the ways this would have reshaped the league for years to come, but ultimately, the trade never went down, because although they wrestled with the offer, the Rockets instead played it safe, kept Sampson, and went with the Twin Tower approach by selecting Olajuwon. Although Hakeem would eventually lead Houston to win 2 championships, given what they could have had if they had accepted the offer, this non-trade was likely the greatest regret of the franchise's history.
Because of a trade made back in 1997 involving Otis Thorpe, the Pistons, although winning 50 games and making it to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2002, had landed themselves the second overall pick in the 2003 draft. Now, it goes without saying Cleveland were going to take the most hyped high school player ever at that point, LeBron James, with their first pick. Now it fell on Detroit to make their pick. Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh were all still available picks on the board at that time. But despite how Darko Milicic is perceived nowadays, he wasn't seen as a completely bad pick at that time, even in as stacked a draft as this was. And seeing as the Pistons had just come off an Eastern Conference Finals run the year prior, their main priority in this draft was to plug any holes in their roster, and one glaring hole that needed immediate attention was their depth, especially at the center position. Thus, explaining in part why they took the 7-foot Serbian center Darko Milicic over the 6'8" small forward Carmelo Anthony with their draft pick. But had this not happened, and the Detroit Pistons had actually decided to take Carmelo over Darko, there's no doubt in my mind that the Pistons could have gone on to win at least 2 to 3 championships as it stands. Firstly, the scoring Carmelo would have brought in his first year with the Pistons would have gone a long way to make this already defensive juggernaut of a team even more of a threat. Granted, although he was putting up 21 points in his rookie year with the Nuggets, had he been on the Pistons, his scoring may have dipped slightly, as the 03 Pistons had more scoring threats than the 03 Nuggets, and maybe Darko Milicic made more sense chemistry-wise for the Pistons. But in the 2004-05 season though, the Pistons were 17th in offensive rating, and still took the San Antonio Spurs to a 7-game series in the finals. Now, had the Pistons had Melo as a consistent scoring option even off the bench, I don't think it would even be a debate that the Pistons would win this championship. Yes, the Spurs had the best defensive rating in the league at the time, but Darko Milicic averaged a whopping 0.7 points in his games that he played. Had this been Melo in his place, there's no doubt he would have been far more serviceable than Darko. Granted, Darko was getting close to no playing time behind Ben Wallace, but I feel like at the very least Melo could have been far more serviceable than his counterpart Tayshaun Prince on the offensive end, who only averaged just over 10 points for the series, which literally could have been the difference in taking them over the hump, as Game 7 of that final series between Detroit and San Antonio literally only came down to a 7-point differential. All variables aside, two things can 100% be said about this what if. Number 1. The Detroit Pistons championship window would have been extended for a couple more years than it originally was. Number 2. We would be looking at Carmelo's legacy in the NBA a whole lot different. Had he went to the Pistons in 2003, there's a high likelihood he would now be an NBA champion, even possibly multiple-time NBA champion.
What if Bill Walton never got hurt? When I say the greatest centers of all time, what are some names that come to mind? Russell, Chamberlain, Shaq, Kareem, Robinson, Hakeem, Moses? All amazing players, but if it had not been for injuries, I can confidently say that this man would have been in that group. The 6'11" Bill Walton. Bill was drafted with the first overall pick in the 1974 NBA draft by the Portland Trail Blazers. He came into the league ready to have an immediate impact, as he was one of the most skilled and talented big men the game had ever seen. His offensive and defensive IQ was off the charts. He always played with hustle and heart, his footwork was pristine, his hook shot was lethal, he had incredible court vision and passing skills for a big man, his rebounding was among the best, and he was one of the greatest rim protectors. The dude was a beast of a basketball player, but unfortunately his body was incredibly brittle. And when I say brittle, I mean he was basically the GOAT of being brittle. In his first 2 years in the NBA, he had chronic foot injuries, dislocating 2 toes, breaking 1 toe in a separate off-the-court incident, he broke his left wrist twice, and dislocated 2 fingers. Again, this all happened in his first 2 seasons. In the playoffs of his 4th season, Bill broke his left ankle, and this would be the injury that ruined the trajectory of his impressive career. Despite all of those injuries, before he even turned 26 years old, he led the league 1 year in rebounds, he led the league 1 season in blocks, he made 2 all-defense teams, he made 2 all-star teams, he was an NBA champion, he was the finals MVP, and he was the 1978 league MVP. How in the world do you accumulate all of these injuries as if you're the glass bones guy from SpongeBob, yet you still manage to achieve all of these accolades? If that doesn't tell you how good Bill Walton was, then nothing will. Unfortunately, after his Portland days were done, he would continue to have severe injuries throughout his career. And although he would win another championship as a legitimate 6th man for the '86 Celtics, his days of being a superstar force in the paint were long behind him. One can only imagine how good he would have been if he had been blessed with a healthy career. Let me know in the comments section what are some of your favorite what-ifs of basketball history. Also, don't forget to check out part 2 on the Big Kiwi's channel. Make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.